Hello everybody, my name is Felipe. I am a master's student in the Neuroscience and Cognition program at the Federal University of ABC, and I will present my master thesis project entitled As We Can See Here on Screen. First of all, sense of agency is the feeling of one's influence in producing external consequences, which generates subjective contiguity in the time course of sensorimotor events involved. For example, when we press a light switch, we expect the light bulb to light up. This phenomenon is related to intentional binding. This can be measured implicitly by studying the temporal binding effect, which is a subjective experience of time compression when an action and a consequence are related. Thus, if we press the switch and we see the light as a consequence, we will have the subjective experience of time compression between the action and its outcome. Yoshi and Haggard have shown affective modulation of this effect. Temporal compression is less strong when negative outcomes are shown, in comparison with positive outcomes. For example, when participants hear the person laughing after pressing a button, the effect is stronger than if the consequence was the sound of a person crying. This effect has been replicated, but other studies here, for example, have not found affective modulation of intentional binding. In these studies, there are some inconsistencies in methodology, as well as a lack of validation with other types of stimuli, however. There are also few studies on the neural basis of temporal binding that might improve a lot its physiologic understanding. Thus, alternative methodologies and stimuli are needed to shed more clarity on these issues. This project aims to investigate the expected modulation of temporal binding when an emotional outcome is presented using linguistic stimuli. We also want to deepen into its neural basis to get a better understanding of how affective stimuli are processed during temporal estimation in the brain. This would be helpful to explain divergences in the literature. Two experiments were designed to these purposes. We will also perform a pre-experimental survey in order to obtain required psycholinguistic indicators that lack Brazilian linguistic normalizations, as age of acquisition and familiarity. Experiment 1 will consist of an intentional binding paradigm with linguistic stimuli as an affective outcome, using a 2AFC task from which a point of subjective equality will be extracted. A shorter PSE is expected as a function of positive emotional valence of the word, as we can see here on the screen. Experiment 2 will consist of a NIRS procedure to measure the valence-specific neural response evoked by the intentional binding paradigm. The cortical representation of the valence of the stimuli will be mapped. The neural basis of the affective modulation of temporal binding will be explored. Finally, understanding phenomena as SOA allows clarifying the role of agency in conscious experience, which is relevant in the identification of underlying cognitive disturbances of psychopathological disorders, like schizophrenia. Also, the intentional binding paradigm helps us understand temporal binding and how we perceive and glue together both the concurrent physical events and the building blocks of our identity. Because emotions shape our relationship with environment, implementing variability in methodologies and stimuli is fundamental to better understanding this phenomenon and their implications for society. Thank you very much for your attention.